Right, recording this after quite some time, like recording a video or just recording a book review after quite some time. So, firstly, let's go into, what are we going to do today? So, it's going to be a review of this book, Who Moved My Cheese, by Dr. Spencer. Quite a book. I mean, I did find it worthy to be of a short video based review, right? So that's why recording this. And so a lot has happened since over the quite last few months. Uh, a lot of things on the personal end, a lot of things work-wise, a lot of things on my own uh, understanding of the world and whatnot, right? So there's quite a lot. So I have been able to read. So recording this on 4th of December, and again have been able to read quite a lot of memorable books this year, right? Uh, and I'll sort of, before we go into the review, I'll sort of try to also cover why I choose not to cover video-based stuff. Uh, be it a book review or be it, some of the stuff that I had been putting out on the same channel, right? On this channel. Uh, so I did find that I think writing is something that takes a lot less effort. It is draining. It is brain draining after, let's say, you think and you write about something for an hour or two. Uh, you are really not able to do anything else for the rest of the day, right? Like that really has happened to me. But then I still found it to be quite better as compared to recording something like this, right? So that's one of the reasons. And yeah, so very naturally, intuitively, I just feel that I just write about something and not sort of review about stuff. But again, both are different things. I've not tried much of videos for me to say that, oh, okay, let's do this, because I end up defaulting myself to writing. And not just about books. This is about pretty much anything in general that I, experience and, go through. So let's sort of come to the review of this book. I mean, again, I probably would have written like 100, 200 word review of this book. But then wanted to try a change, right? So this sort of makes sense. This format makes sense for this book, considering this book especially. Uh, yeah, so let's, I think, sort of get into it, right? So, as you can see in the cover, it is, well, it said that it's one of the most successful business book that has ever been around. And I kind of can see why that is the case, right? Uh, and then again, we'll talk about this in depth in the review. So, Spencer Johnson happens to be, have a PhD and whatnot. Let's sort of quickly look up, what else he up to. Uh, Not the one that we were looking for, but okay, right. Uh, yeah, I wanna see what he's up to. Okay, so BA degree in psychology from University of Southern California, MD from Royal College, Surgeon Center for Medical Club, which is Mayo and Harvard Medical School, Leadership Fellow at the Harvard Business School, and current advisor to the JFK government. And yeah, so something different, right? Like two different fields. So someone who was associated a lot in the medical field and then, writing a book that's on self-help business and whatnot, right? Uh, but again, I really do believe in, doing different things at different points of time. And again, that helps you connect the dots in life, right? Uh, right. So let's sort of get into the book. So I do have, some handwritten notes that I had taken when I did read the book. So it's a short read to start off with. It's a very short read. It's not even 100 pages, and it's quite a short story that you get to read in the book. So yeah, let's sort of get into the format of the book, right? So format of the book is basically this. So a short gathering, uh, the entire story, the main story, and there's a discussion, right? So the gathering sort of begins with there's like a room, and then some of the folks who are there, they are about to start reading this particular book. I think that is the case. Uh, right, and then the entire story starts. That's like the main part, and then the discussion is, let's say, 10-15 pages of when the folks in, let's say, one particular company, one particular room, they've read this book, and then they talk about how it really helped them. They reflect on that particular story, right? uh right, so I'll sort of also try to get into what exactly this book is about, and it does make sense. Like, if you look at it from a very broad lens, uh it does make sense. And I think this book will sort of make sense to pretty much everyone that ends up reading this book, right? So uh really the book sort of comes down to how you can change, like changes, and when changes happen, what do people end up doing, and how exactly do people behave in that particular situation, and the whole journey behind change, right? Like, when can you even see that there is something that is going to happen as a change? And then, in many ways, what is it that you can deploy in your own thinking when it comes to thinking about that particular change? Uh, and that helps you overcome that particular change relatively easily, right? So that is about the book. So this particular section is quite written uh, on the back cover of the book. So you'll get to know, anticipate, how to anticipate change, adapt to changes quickly, enjoy change, that's quite something, and be ready to change quickly again and again. Right. So let's sort of get into the story. And then there are some concerning points that I did find about the book. Because again, like, what else, what all can you cover in 100 pages, right? In a very short, minimalistic story. But yeah, there are some things that the book has discounted, and we'll talk about that as well. So some blind sides of the book that we will talk about as well. And I'm sure there are many more points that the book has missed. Uh, but then, yeah, like, these two, three are going to be the points that I'll, talk about, which I found out to be right. Okay, so when we go into the book, like, the preface and the intro talks about, so part of us and all of us, the simple and the complex, the four imaginary characters depicting in the story are Sniff and Scurry, and the little people, Hem and Haw. And they are intended to represent simple and complex parts of ourselves, regardless of our age, gender, race, or nationality. So sometimes we may act like Sniff, who is one of the mouse or mice characters, who sniffs out change early, or Scurry, who scurries into action, or Hem, who denies and resists change as he fears it will lead to something worse, or Haw, who learns to adapt in time when he sees changing can lead to something better. Whatever parts of us we chose to use, we all share something in common, a need to find our own way in the maze and succeed in changing times. So the whole book is about these four characters, and they are all quite there in a maze. There is, unfortunately, there is absolutely no picture of a maze for me to represent here. Or I think that would have been something good, right? Uh, right. So these four characters, so two are mice and two are little people. And then we'll also talk about how they are different and how what really happens in the story. Also, spoiler alerts. This is going to be. I'll pretty much tell you all the story that is going to happen in the book, right? Uh, So yeah, probably makes sense if you read the book and then probably come to this. Right. Okay, so four characters, Curry and Sniff, okay, as we saw here. And Haw and Hem are the little people, and Curry and Sniff are the two other people, right? The mice. Uh, okay, right. So now let's come to this bit. Okay. So this particular comparison chart, right? This is what I'm going to talk about first. So this is where all the characters are. All the characters are there in one particular maze, and they need to survive, right? Since they are sort of living there, they're spending their lives there. And the maze, as you can imagine, is a typical maze. There are some dead ends. There are ways, which one needs to navigate so that they can probably be out of the maze. But for now, everything happens in the maze, right? It's a typical meal. So mice and little people are basically two and two characters each. Uh, and then let's sort of see how they are different, right? So cheese, the simple cheese is something that the mice always try to go out for, and then they are happy with that. Okay, that's it. And the little people are the smart folks. What they end up going for is the C, the cheese with the capital C, right? So they've given like a bigger status to the same cheese that these mice have been uh, getting. And little people are the smart people, like they know rationality, they know emotions. They, of course, everyone knows emotions, but then they are the smart people who put in rationality, thought, decision making, learning from their own past experiences and all that into what really happens when they're going out to take that cheese, right? Uh, so Sniff and Scurry are, as I said, the two characters, and Ham and Haw are the other two characters. And basically, how mice operate is on a very simple basis, right? Like they go trial and error. If they find cheese in one particular spot, they like it, and if they do not, what they simply do is, without much thinking, they simply go to the next section of the maze, and then if they find their cheese, well and good. Otherwise, they keep on doing the same thing, right? Now, the little people are the ones, who end up getting into trouble. Uh, and why do they get into trouble, right? So, again, just a little bit about the little people. They have their own expertise. They have got their running shoes and whatnot, and all of that, right? When they are looking out for that cheese, the cheese with the capital C. But again, it's the same cheese what the mice have been getting. Uh, and then what happens is there's a particular section is called section C. Uh, and then that is actually the section where there's a big lot of cheese. uh, and then the little people are the ones who end up actually just creating one whole ecosystem of their own for their own self, so that they can very easily be around that particular cheese, right? So they end up building their own home. They end up building their own workstation, stay station, and they pretty much start living very, next to that section C for that particular cheese, right? Uh, and then they end up getting very comfortable with really what happens, right? Uh, their stock of cheese is quite next to them, and then they've already created this whole system where they're living next to the cheese, and they are sort of becoming very much stable, secure, and all that, right? So, okay, coming to the next part, home made home around cheese and got comfortable, as I said, for the little people. They got comfy. What they also did was, they called their friends over, and they also said them that this is something that they have earned. Because also remember, right, like they were looking for cheese in the first place. They went out and seeked out the cheese, and then this is where they are. They've sort of settled. They have a good lifestyle around that particular cheese. They're living comfortably, and this is what they end up boosting with their friends, right? Uh, and then one day, what really happens is the stock of cheese. It's not like, there's a magic fairy who will uh produce cheese. Uh, and that stock of cheese gets on depleting, right? As simple as that. So the little people get into trouble. What happens is they have settled at one particular place, but then there is no food for them to have. What do they do? Uh, that's where the existential question comes in, and then uh, you know, as as simple as that, the mice folks, what they do is, they just trial and error method, right? They simply go out and go out for the next particular cheese, which probably they'll find in the maze for sure. And this is what they're confident about. And if they probably run out of fuel for them to even survive, then then that's it, right? Like that, there is no other end to it. That's it. If they probably starve to death, then that is the case. But then they do not lose, their hope and whatnot, and do not really put a lot of effort or thought in, and they simply go out looking for that cheese, right? And then they do find cheese at one particular spot, and then basically that's how they operate in their own life. Now, the little people is, the focus of the story, and this is what happens in general, right? Like if you see, uh, pretty much, everything in life, right? Like relationships, work, what we end up doing at, various points of time. This is really what happens. We try to seek security, comfort. Again, it's very basic, but then not going very much deep into it. But then this is what we by default like, uh, right? We like things that are stable, but then we also need to watch out for, and the whole point of the book is basically try to watch out for things that you might not expect. Um, and yeah, like that's pretty much about the book. Uh, so what really happens when cheese is gone one day? So they start, worrying, and the little people get, end up getting worried, and they end up saying that it's not fair that, the thing that they had earned is suddenly gone, and they probably cannot survive. But then, uh, let's look at it this way. Let's say there is one particular thing that you've achieved in your life. Let's say it could be a work related job. It will for sure not happen that you'll be, I mean, of course, again, there are exceptions. Like that is probably the reason why, these government jobs are so popular. But then for you to really get good at stuff, uh, just try knowing that stuff might end some or the other point in the future, at some or the other point in the future, right? Uh, and then this whole book is around that particular lesson. So how do you anticipate that change? How do you deal with that change? How do you think about that change, and whatnot, right? So uh, if we see, there are characters in the book, right? Now, again, let's talk about the little people. Now, of these two, there's also quite a difference. In these two people, there's also quite some difference. So Hem is the one who denies and resists change, and he fears that it will lead to something worse. And Haw is the one who learns to adapt in time. And when he sees change is something that might happen, then they better need to change, right? Uh, because again, sort of pretty much you can look at pretty much every situation in life with Darwin's statement, right? Survival of the fittest, right? So uh, if you can do well in one particular situation, then you will survive that situation. And if you keep on doing that repeatedly, then you'll probably get better at it. And then you can probably focus on other situations in which you can do better. So that's basically survival of the fittest, right? If you, again, simply just wonder, right? Like just that one statement is something with which you can end up thinking your whole life, right? Pretty much every situation, every action that we end up doing, right? Uh, Now, so what happens later when the cheese is gone? So, Ham is the one who thinks that change is not something good. He tries to, be there and, not really help Haw when he is going out and seeking for more cheese. This is what happens. But then Haw ends up doing that. Haw ends up going out seeking more cheese, and then he probably comes back with more cheese, and then they both survive. So it's a very mentality based problem. uh, Again, everyone, just a parallel thought is, let's say, folks have different ways of, dealing with change. Folks have different ways of overcoming changes, and that, I think, is, one thing that, uh, if you're close with someone, then that's one place you need to be uh, at the same level with, in a way, right? Because it makes things easy. Because otherwise, this guy Haw would not have had so much trouble in the first place for him to convince, and then he had to learn his through his own experiences, and then, they probably lived happily ever after in that particular new section. And once they know how to navigate that particular maze to find cheese. Okay. Going next. So there's one more thing that this guy does when Haw is the one who can adapt and, anticipate this change, right? So Haw, when he's going out to look for new cheese, he does something. He paints. He just writes a very simple quote, which is, uh, let me look up one. So something like, having cheese makes you happy. Something like, the more important your cheese is to you, the more important you hold on to it, right? So he ends up writing such quotes on the walls. For example, one more: if you do not change, you become extinct, right? So he ends up writing all these quotes on the walls where he's going out to in the maze, where he is seeking out more cheese, and then that sort of ends up becoming a learning lesson for this guy, him. And then him sort of adapts to what really the change is, and then they find one new section where the cheese is there, and then they know how to process that particular thing, right? And again, one thing to keep in mind is, probably at the new section there would be something something different, right? There would probably be something different. Like, it'll probably have its own set of changes and challenges, right? So that's basically about the book, right? How Hem and Haw end up navigating that particular change. Uh, and then, just very much in general, like, the book has its own interpretation that you can do. And then, one thing that I really liked was the length of the book, right? Like, the book says this itself, that it probably is a 30 minute book that you can probably end up reading uh, on any free uh, sometime that you end up have. And then it's so simple. It's pretty minimalistic. It's a story that's very easy to understand. It's something that you can digest very easily as well. And then, probably, this leads to, it does give you like a little bit of push, and, like, it takes away that sort of negative energy that you probably have been holding on to, because it gives you a good uh, perspective when it comes to thinking about change. Now, there's one more book that I can think of when it comes to, let's say, change and thinking about change. And again, I've talked about this a little bit very briefly in my upstream review as well. So this is the book, How to Change Things When Change is Hard. So Dan and Chip Heath brother, are the ones who have written this particular book. Very much, planning to read probably next year. Uh, so yeah, that's I think pretty much about the review of the book, and what the entire book is about. Uh, and then I think a lot of people end up gifting this book to their employees, their teams, so that they get to know how to be on the same page when it comes to something, right? Because it helps. It helps with situations. Now, that's a different game altogether, that even the place where I happen to work, we do talk a lot about books, and we end up suggesting a lot of content to some of our clients who happen to be like employees of the company. Uh, and then again, like it probably is only the 5-10% of the folks who end up, you know, reading and very, very actively consuming what we have been sharing, right? Uh, I'm saying stuff on the extreme end. Of course, there are, many different ways in which we engage with folks, and some people engage at their own bandwidth. So yeah, that's really about the book. How to change, how to anticipate change, how to change quickly again, and how in a way changes are also good, right? Because probably when you find something, and then why not go for the other stuff, right? uh, and then I do like to think that life is really not how you imagined it would be. There's always like another version that it ends up throwing at you, right? Because you never know what's going to happen next, right? In fact, just on some parallel thoughts, uh, I started reading How Proust Can Change Your Life. It's another book by Alan de Botton, and the whole book starts with how uh, it's a question that ends up getting thrown around the world, and Proust answers this. The question is around death, like how and what would happen if you sort of get to know that you're going to die soon. So Proust expands on that, and it's quite a book. I've just started reading it. Uh, right. So yeah, that I think is about the book. And then again, I think death is something that teaches you a lot. Uh, Again, for starters, if you probably do not know and know me well, so I'm recording this in December, and I did lose my father this August. So yeah, that's quite something that happened this year. Uh, so yeah, more on that probably in some of my other pieces that I'm going to write about towards the end of this year. And yeah, so there's that does really teach you a lot about stuff. Okay. Now, I'm just looking if there's any, other points that I can talk about. So mostly we've covered what has been in the book. Uh, okay. And yeah, so there are two things that I felt that the book did discount. Okay. So there's a very fair comparison between the little people and the mice. And then little people, as we mentioned, are the folks who are smart. They know how to rationalize things, how to put stuff down together. They, make things well. But I think that's how people end up functioning, right? We as humans end up functioning, right? So there's that. And about uh, right. So it kind of gives me a thought that the people who generally do not think that much are uh, a little bit happy in life, because they do not sort of keep that free space and to have that confusion and have those existential questions, and because they're all just happy in the small trivialities of life, right? Like they're fixing the trivialities of life. For example, I do know someone very closely, and uh, all throughout the day that I would see is there is absolutely no free time for them to talk about philosophical things, talk about philosophical questions, self-reflect and whatnot, right? But yeah, like folks are like they're like that as well, right? So yeah, there's that. But again, not to mention that the little people and the humans and the folks who end up doing the rationalization part and all that, it's not like they are obsolete as well, right? Like if you probably do not have free time and you do not do this, then exceptional works like many philosophical books and whatnot, like we probably would never have had those, right? We probably would never have had the great philosophers that we probably end up quoting and whatnot, right? So there's that. And then there's also one thing, right? Like probably folks like Socrates, and the whole Stoic philosophy, and just any person in general, like they like loneliness is the cost of self-development, right? They probably went away from the folks who end up okay, let me put it this way. Uh, the folks who end up writing such great stuff and doing such great stuff, they probably liked involving with themselves and their own stuff as compared to the folks with whom they were spending time. That's why we ended up getting such great works. Again, not a very fair comparison. That statement is quite false. But then look at it this way, right? Like, had they not spent that alone time, uh, with themselves working on the stuff that, cared what they cared about, we would have never gotten such great stuff, right? So that's really uh, you know, about life and the folks who end up presenting great work. Uh, so that really is, I think, how the whole world sort of works in, right? So there's that. And again, one thing to sort of reflect and just think about is having a growth mindset, right? Having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Again, there's a book by Angela Duckworth, if I'm not wrong. Uh, okay, not the quiz. The hmm. Yes, sorry. Carol Dweck is the one who wrote this book. Oh, Angela Duckworth must be Grit book then. Grit. Grit is the one that she had written. Okay, so mindset, psychology of success, and this whole book. And then a lot of people say that growth versus fixed mindset is something that Carol Dweck gave to the world. I think it's quite an old book. Yeah, it did come out in 2006, right? So yeah, there's that. So one more comparison between, how you can just take growth versus fixed mindset and then, you know, just chart out the path of one person's life, right? So there's that as well. So I think that is pretty much about the book. So I think I'll probably just add one more point that again to, just reflect and uh, that's right. And then it's again, this is something that I will, it's a topic that I do wanna, write about and, uh, talk in more detail about. And it's also quite something that I have been sharing with most of my folks, who I know closely, right? Some of my close friends with whom I can have such, conversation topics. So, we know Simone, right? Simone, the Bauer, please correct me how to pronounce that. So she was John Paul's partner. They both were partners. They never got married, but then they were partners. They were in an open relationship and whatnot, right? Great, great philosophers. So Simone did write a book. It's called The Second Sex. Now this whole book is about, the female perspective, and imagine, this book, came out, I think, in the 60s, 50s, or 40s, something somewhere around that time. And for women, this book quite became a thing, right? A lot of people got inspired from the book, and they said that women in general, females in general, they were uh, quite going about their own lives. And imagine this is the 50s, 40s, 60s, right? Like how life for a woman would have been back then, right? Uh, the typical stuff, right, that they would end up doing most likely is, probably taking care of the house when the man of the house is probably gone out for a war, or, is doing some uh, industrial revolution related job, probably working at a factory, and then there's one person at the home who takes care of the kids, who takes care of the household and whatnot, right? So that typical stuff, right? And then many folks say that they ended up reading the book by Simone, and their lives changed. They enrolled themselves into universities, and they started doing stuff uh, which which was unconventional in a way, right? So it's quite a big book as well. It says there are two parts. It did come out in 49. And yeah, that's about the book and about Simone's life, right? So this is something very interesting. So Simone, of all people, was Uh, so she categorized folks into two different paths, bourgeois and non-bourgeois. Again, correct me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. So, okay, I'm just looking this up. Okay. Huh. So she was born into a Parisian family, bourgeois family, and then of all folks, thanks to her own upbringing, uh, I also want to just look up if she has any sisters or brothers. Hmm. Hmm. Makes sense. She was a elder sister to this lady here. Okay, so thanks to her upbringing, thanks to the dynamics in her own family, of all people, Simone became a non-bourgeois. So again, more on bourgeois, non-bourgeois. That's open for you to interpretation. But bourgeois is basically the folks who just end up doing the trivial for the sake of ease of this video. Uh, the bourgeois are the folks who are busy with the trivialities of life, and non-bourgeois are the folks who engage with art. They are unconventional. They think philosophically. They have existential questions. They write books. They read. Uh, uh, and then bourgeois and non-bourgeois will always have this conflict, right? So yeah, of all people, Simone became a non-bourgeois despite having a bourgeois family. And I think that is something that's important for someone to become a non-bourgeois. You need to have a rebellic, uh, uh, mindset, because there's something that's going on which in your own family that you probably do not, uh, you know, relate with. So that ends up becoming a non-bourgeois. And then Simone, again, must have been a great person, and also in many ways an equally problematic person in many ways as well. But again, I'm sorry, I'm just putting, pinching my own ear when I say this, because people have their own sides, right? So yeah, I'm not sure if I'll be so much comfortable, speaking to this particular person back in the days. Yeah, yeah. Because also in the last review that I wrote of this particular book, right, as the existentialist cafe. Come on. Okay, so I did talk about how self-indulgent and self-obsessed would be these philosophers, because the book talks about that point as well. And then the writer Sarah Bakewell goes on to say that she probably herself considered these characters very flawed as well, right, in life. Uh, and again, those were all the traits what led them to do such great stuff, right? I'm just pulling up this uh, review. This right. So also had quite a lot of stuff to highlight from this book when I read this. So yeah, quite a book. In fact, this probably happens to be the best book that I've ever read. Uh, so yeah, yeah, there's that. Now, uh, and again, Jean Paul is someone who has written a lot. Uh, and then again, philosophy is something that uh, is really interesting, right? We should all talk about philosophy, engage with philosophy, uh, think about such questions, because I've started to you know like doing that, because it does sort of probably give you or leave you with a lot more confusion, but it does make you bear your own life and also bear the lives of other people who are out there in your life and pretty much anyone in general, right? So uh, it helps. It helps. Uh, so yeah, I think that's about the book. Would I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely yes. Uh, it's very well it's very well worthy of about 1 hour that you're going to spend with this book. And yeah, I think that's all for this one. What probably do I have a video in mind for the channel for the next one? Right now, no. There are quite a lot of pieces that I would like to, write about and, just write daily about those and I'll just keep on expanding those. So yeah, let's see. If I probably find a book or something that's worthy of talking about, I'll definitely put up on this channel. But for now, goodbye and see you in the next one.